guys, it's Cavin here with a very new hair color. I am no longer blonde. I have red hair, so very different. It is still me. This is not a very different channel. Same person, just different hair. I felt like changing things up very drastically. I hope you guys like it, and that is pretty much it. So today's video is going to be about a not so exciting topic, and that is paying for wedding expenses. And before you click away, or hopefully you even click to watch this video, I hope it is actually full of some things that you guys did not consider. So let's go ahead and get into the video all about paying for wedding expenses and things you might not have thought about. First thing is first, before you spend a penny on anything related to your wedding, you need to make sure that you set an overall wedding budget. So you need to figure out whether you want to spend $1,000 on your wedding, $10,000 on your wedding, $25,000, $50,000, $100,000, $1 million on your wedding. You need to figure out what that is. Talk with the person, people, whoever is paying for the wedding, and figure out the total sum, money figure that is going to be spent on the wedding, and that is what you can spend, okay? You don't have to spend that much, but that is the max ceiling that you are able to spend, and you need to know that before you set your individual budgets for each vendor. You've got to know the total amount, because the last thing that you want to do is, if you have a $50,000 budget but you didn't set that, let's say you drop 30 grand on your venue, and then you've only is a relative term, but you only have $20,000 left for all of your other vendors. And some of those categories, you might find it really hard to get the vendor you want because you simply don't have enough funds to stretch across all the vendors that you want. So don't blow your budget because you didn't know what the budget was and you overspent in a category without knowing your overall budget, because you need to know the overall in order to determine how much you can spend on each individual vendor. The second thing you need to be aware of is that most vendors are going to charge a non-refundable retainer, which is a very fair and industry standard thing to do to make it non-refundable. Most will make it transferable, maybe within a certain amount of days or within reason, but they're going to charge that non-refundable retainer, and then they will have a final balance. Maybe they split it up into 3 payments or 4 payments. A lot of people that I know do 2 to 3. So I do 2. I am a 50-50 person. So a 50% non-refundable but transferable retainer, and then a 50% final balance. My payment terms are 50% non-refundable retainer is due to secure the date. That is what the retainer is. That is what that retainer pays for. And then the final 50% is due 2 weeks before the wedding date. Some people will charge that final balance 30 days or maybe 60 days, sometimes even 90 days before the wedding date rolls around. It all depends, but those are typically the payment terms that you're going to be looking at. If I have a couple who ask me if we can break it up into thirds, I'll say yes, but typically I am pretty firm on requiring a 50% retainer. So you can always ask your vendors if they have some sort of payment plan. And one tip that I have on that is, if your vendors have a sort of split 50-50, or even if it's a third, say you book your vendors out a year and a half in advance, and so you spent all this money over this couple of months, maybe a month, booking these vendors, and then your wedding day rolls around and all of those payments are due about a month, let's say a month before your wedding. What I would actually suggest is start paying off those final balances a couple months early, so you're not dumping all of that money 1 month before the wedding, because that is a lot of money to drop in one single amount of time. So go ahead and sprinkle that final balance money out little instances at a time. It just feels a little better, at least in my mind, to go about it that way. Now let's talk about payment methods, the very exciting part of this video, because the way that you can pay vendors is going to vary from vendor to vendor. And not all vendors are going to accept credit cards. I actually don't, unless it's an international client who simply cannot do bank transfer or something even like Venmo or anything like that. The reason that I don't accept credit cards is because the credit card fees are really high. on thousands of dollars of transactions, I cannot be taking a credit card fee. And you might say, well, Cavin, why don't you just raise your prices to compensate for that credit card fee? Well, I don't want to have to raise my prices to make it more expensive for everybody just to compensate for those people who can only pay with credit card. I don't want to have to do that. I want to keep my prices where they are and just have everybody pay via bank transfer, which I would say 99.9% of my clients are happy to do. But anyways, moving on. The kinds of payments that you guys can expect to be able to pay with are, one, going to be credit card for those vendors who do take it. Now, I know a lot of you want to pay with credit card, one, because of the points, two, maybe because you don't have all that money readily available at that point in time. And to that I say that's probably a common scenario, but make sure that you do have or will have the money to pay for the vendors that you're paying for. Don't spend money that you won't have. Do not go into debt over your wedding. Going into debt over a wedding is probably one of the most financially irresponsible things you can do, and I don't say that with judgment. I say that as a piece of advice, okay? Go into debt over something way more worth it, like buying a house for stability. Do not go into debt over a wedding. If you find yourself going into debt over your wedding, you need to scale back your wedding greatly. You need to cut that guest list, slash tables left and right, or just really figure out a way to just scale it back in another area, okay? Do not go into debt over your wedding. That is not a good way to start off your marriage, and I think most people would agree with me on that. Another way might be Venmo or PayPal, something like that. Maybe something like a Stripe bank transfer, which is basically what I use. I use a client management system that processes a bank transfer via Stripe, so that's what I use. Venmo kind of works the same way, so does PayPal. Those can also take credit cards. Now be aware that sometimes the vendor might pass credit card fees on to you if you choose to pay with a credit card. In some states that's legal, in some states it's not. But do be aware that that might be something that pops up because some vendors might not want to have to eat those credit card fees. They are a small business and those fees do add up. And again, they might not want to simply raise their rates to compensate for those fees because they don't want to do that to all of those other clients who aren't paying with credit card. Now, another form of payment that you might be able to pay with are checks. Definitely make sure that you have the money in your bank before the vendor is going to cash that check because nobody wants a bounced check. And the last method of payment would be cash. One thing to be extremely aware of if you are going shopping like for a wedding dress or wedding expenses, or if you're paying deposits and balances with a credit card, is that it is very, very common for credit card companies to decline wedding expenses because all of a sudden you're making these big $100,000 credit card transactions and your bank is like, what the heck is happening? And you're like, I'm getting married, that's what's happening, but your bank does not know that. So what I would recommend is if you are going to do something like wedding dress shopping, for example, where you're physically going to a store, you're not just sitting at home or paying some sort of vendor's invoice online where you're in the comfort of your own home and you can call the bank and whatever. If you're physically going out to a store where you're going to be swiping a card for a wedding transaction, if it is your card, that's one thing, but if it is your parents' card or your fiance's card, make sure that they know to be maybe available for a phone call from you if the card gets declined so that they can then call their bank, because the last thing you want is to not be able to use your card to put down a deposit for your dress or something like that because your father's credit card or your mother's credit card or your fiance's credit card company is declining it because they're seeing this huge charge for a wedding dress and they are flagging it as suspicious. So make sure that you inform that person that you're going shopping with the card so that they can be on standby if needed to call their bank. All right, well, I think that's pretty much all that I have to say about paying for things with your wedding, other than just a last bit of advice, like be responsible when it does come to budgeting. I think I've had some other videos on my channel about budgeting. If I haven't, comment down below saying that you couldn't find one and give me some ideas for specific budget things to make videos about. I am almost tapping out on my video list. I have a couple more coming out over the next few weeks. But other than that, I am once again running out of ideas and asking for your help for some video ideas. So every now and then I get inspired. I write down a list of like 4 to 5, maybe 6 video ideas. I film them all in one sitting. I pump them out over like a month or two, and then I'm like, back at square one and I have no idea what I want to talk about. So I would definitely love to hear from you guys a couple of video ideas, something that you think that I could spend at least 5 minutes talking about. So write them down in the comments below. If you guys did enjoy this video, I know it wasn't very exciting. It's kind of like talking about accounting type stuff. At least leave a like and subscribe if you are new, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!